Transportation Policy Committee. This meeting is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please complete the request to speak form. MAG staff can assist with any questions you may have. If you are parked in the garage, a validation stamp is available on the information table in the hallway. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from the MAG staff. We will now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members.
Thank you, Chair and members. I will go down the list of members alphabetically. Please unmute and indicate if you are present. David Barry. Councilmember Butler.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Caputi.
Here.
Thank you. Doug DeClusen. Councilmember Edwards.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego. Councilmember Garland. Mayor Giles. John Graham.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Haney.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Manfredi. Jackie Meck. Mayor Osborne.
Present.
Thank you. Tyler Pace.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Pizzillo.
Here.
Thank you. Mark Reardon.
Present.
Thank you. Supervisor Sellers.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Wires.
I'm here.
Thank you. Chair Wheatley.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember White.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you so much. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we begin today's meeting, I would like to take just a moment to recognize a Transportation Policy Committee member, Roy Miller. He recently passed away after illness. Mr. Miller was a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy and served on the TPC for the last year. And we greatly appreciate his service to the region. If we could take just a moment of silence for his family and loved ones. I appreciate that and his service over the last year. I would also like to welcome our new members, Councilmember Caputi, is that right? From the city of Scottsdale, Councilmember Garland from the city of Tempe, Councilmember Haney, city of Surprise, Mayor Pizzillo, city of Goodyear, who is returning to the TPC. Thank you for your service. And Councilmember White, city of Avondale, Mayor Wilson, city of Apache Junction. So thank you all so much for serving on the Transportation Policy Committee. Our next item is call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda, informational items, or items on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for a call to the audience unless the chair requests an exception to this limit. Please note that we have a new podium location adjacent to the audience seating for which members of the public are invited to provide their comments. And I do not believe we've received any requests to speak comments.
That's correct.
Okay, that is correct. We have not received any today. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website. Any comments received 2 hours prior to the meeting have been shared with committee members in advance of the meeting for consideration and will be included in the formal meeting minutes. I recognize we have received one online comment for the call to the audience. that has been placed at your desk. And we have received no others. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. We will move on to items 4A and 4B, which are for information only. Does any member of the committee have any questions or request a presentation on any of these items? I did want to make a comment on 4B. I would love to recognize MAG set such a high bar for the public engagement, from public meetings to information sessions to online surveys. And it truly just shows your commitment to public participation. So I just wanted to highlight that and appreciate all of staff's time and effort on that behalf. The next item on the agenda is item number 5, which is the approval of the consent agenda. And those are items 5A through 5C. Do any member of the committee have any comments or requests for a presentation on any of these items? Okay, let me just see if we have, I appreciate, we got a motion and a second already. There is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on any item on the consent agenda. I have not received any requests. Are there any that we've received, Sin?
No, we have not received any
There
more.
are
Thank
none.
you.
Great. Because we already have a motion and a second. We had, and any online written comments?
Thank you, Chair. We have not received any online written comments for the consent agenda.
Okay. I believe our motion was from Mayor Wires and our second was Mayor Orsborn. Okay. Will we have those participating in the meeting online take part of the voice vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio? We need to see the faces of everyone to participate in the voice vote. For those who cannot or do not want to turn on their cameras, staff will conduct a roll call vote. Staff will only call in those virtual participants who did not turn on their cameras. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote so that staff can count the people's names whose cameras are not on. Can we have a voice vote of all those in the room and all those online? Those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. Thank you. And members, please leave your cameras on. Staff, can you take a roll call of the members participating virtually that did not turn on their cameras?
Thank you, Chair and members. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Mayor Pizzillo?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart?
Aye.
Thank you. Chair, the motion passes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Jen Daniels is on the line too, and I also vote aye.
Thank you, Jen. All right, our next item is item 6, update on the Interstate 10 Deck Park Tunnel to the Interstate 10 Interstate 17 Split Freeway Corridor Planning Study. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion and will be presented by Bradley Williams, Transportation Engineer. Thank you, Bradley.
Just checking to be sure the microphone is on. All right, got that out of the way quickly. Thank you, Chair Wheatley and members of the committee for this opportunity to bring a second update on the I-10 freeway corridor study. Okay, good. A reminder, we were here a year ago and gave you an update. The area is from the tunnel, the Deck Park Tunnel. You can see that in orange at the left side of the diagram. It goes east to the mini stack, interchange, then south past the west entrance to the airport to the split interchange with I-17. It also runs north on the 51 to Thomas Road. This is a high-level study. Our task is to find effective and implementable solutions to the problems in this corridor. And we're providing a framework for improvements that will be funded in the future through Prop 479. They tell me that repetition is a great way to have people remember. So I'm going to repeat myself. This is the beginning of a process. We are just beginning it. We have a lot of information to share with you. This is establishing a framework that will go into design. The design will be done later through a series of phases. And we are identifying issues that I'll share with you this morning that will need to be addressed when we get into the design phases. We have a number of planning partners. I want to point out specifically the City of Phoenix, the airport, and the Federal Aviation Administration have been attending our progress meetings and participating in this project. 1 year ago, as I mentioned, we gave you an update. It was September of last year. At that time, we were planning a public engagement survey. Thank you for the assistance of all of your agencies in helping us do that. We got their results. We have now reached the point where we have a series of recommendations to share with you. We are in the process now of talking to stakeholders and sharing this information with them, including, again, the city and the airport and FAA. There will be another public engagement. We have a public meeting to share these ideas with the public coming up in October. After that is over, we will make appropriate revisions to our recommendations, come back to the committees at MAG for approval. Following that, we will be able to begin design and construction will be funded through Prop 479. For those of you who were here a year ago, I'm going to repeat some of the update we gave you last year. For those of you who are new, apologies, I'm going to run through this very quickly. I'll try to be as clear as I can. This is a corridor that has a lot of crashes. If you look at the green number on the left, there's an average of 5 crashes every single day in this corridor. This is data for 6 years between 2016 and 2021. And the heat map here, the red circles are where the most crashes occur. The yellow is showing a high volume of crashes. They're also down at the bottom now, 1.2 crashes resulting in severe injury or death every month. And you can see the hot spots here where they occur. If you're able to see little black dots on this graph, those are indicating crashes that resulted in death. So certainly we understood that safety is a very important element of this process. And we looked into what are those events that create a higher opportunity or a higher risk of crashes. And certainly we found speed differential, a place where you have cars going very quickly in the same section of road where cars are stopped or going very slowly. Those are incidents waiting to happen when we have that. This diagram is showing you one type of speed differential. On the right-hand side, you can see the color-coded section. This is I-10 from the mini stack going south to Sky Harbor Boulevard. And down at the bottom, you see a dark red line. There's been a bottleneck there. Cars are going 8 miles an hour. That's an average over an hour. And as you go further north, you can see that the speed gradually grows higher and higher. What's happening is the bottleneck is hardly moving. Cars are coming, and when they slam on their brakes, the cube begins to form and it gets longer and longer. And you can see over an hour how that affects the average speed of the section. If you're lucky enough to hit this at the very end of the peak and everything's gone, you wouldn't stop. But it's showing here how that line moves where people have to slam on their brakes. Here's another example. This is on I-10 going eastbound towards the mini stack. It's at the exit ramp of 16th Street. Every dot you see in this diagram is a car. They're not all on it at the same time. This is over a period of time. The yellow dots are cars that are going fast. The red dots are cars that are going very slowly. What we're seeing here is the right-hand lanes are queued back. They're trying to get to the 202 and the 51. They're in a long queue, and they're moving very slowly, while the cars on the left are going very, very quickly on the main line. This creates problems of trying to weave out of the slow section. Cars are moving very fast. They have to slow down to get into that section. So this is another type of speed differential. Now, what you're looking at in this diagram, the blue lines are showing where we have speed differential, as we've just described. The white lines in this diagram are where cars are generally moving at about the same speed. When I overlay the crashes on this, you can see that there's a high correlation between speed differential and where crashes occur. So at the end of the presentation last year, I was saying that we need to find a way to reduce the crashes, and we can do that by eliminating the speed differential. So we're making early conclusions at that time that safety was our highest priority for this corridor. Of course, increasing capacity, reducing congestion is still very important, but safety always has to come first. Now I want to go to the survey that was done last fall. And again, thank you for all your assistance in doing that. We had almost 2,000 people respond. And interestingly, about half of those were people who live within the inner loop area. The other half live outside of that area. So it's an interesting mix. There seemed to be a uniform reaction to the question of how bad is congestion, from bad to very bad. 80% were giving those responses. When we asked them why, what is the cause of this problem, stops and starts was at the top of the list, followed by erratic driver behavior. We see those as safety issues. So safety was at the top. There's a very close third, which is long travel times, people moving slowly. And so they're close, but safety is at the top. We then asked them, do you ever avoid this area? And the answer came back 56%. Basically, yes, we avoid it whenever we can. When we asked them reasons for that, the answers were the same. Stops and starts, erratic driver behavior. Safety is again at the top of the list. Long travel times is a very close third. When we asked them, what's the most important objective of this study? Safety again was right at the top of the list. And travel time and ease of travel, that's sort of half safety and half travel time. And they certainly said the freeway main line and the interchanges are the problems that need to be addressed. Finally, we asked them, do you support improving this area? We got an overwhelming support. And the answer was pretty much, we don't care what you do, but you need to do something. So then the community messages actually helped to confirm our analytical conclusions, which were safety is the most important objective. We need to increase capacity, but we have other objectives, protecting the communities, community access, et cetera. Here's an example that shows how we came about trying to find where those locations are, where the bottlenecks begin, so we could make sure we're addressing speed differential. What you're looking at on the left is telling you what average speeds look like in a 5-minute period, even before the peak hour began. Green is fast, red is very slow. And I apologize for those who can't differentiate between green and red. We weren't able to create one with a better mix of colors. But you can see on the left, and the way we did this was we created a sophisticated microsimulation model over time. And we ran it at the beginning before the congestion began, and then followed it over time as the bottlenecks began to appear and got worse and worse. What you see on the right-hand side is at the end of the hour, it's just all red lines. So if you look at the end of the hour, you can't really figure out where to address the problem. But by doing this, we were able to identify 9 specific locations where we had bottlenecks. We could see them occurring, we could follow them over time, and we knew those were the areas that needed to have attention. Now, how did we come up with ideas to fix this? We have a couple of strategies. And again, this information, it was shared. Some of this information was shared in the previous update. We have something called braided ramps. I'll get to that in a moment. And also collector distributor roads. They're very similar in what they accomplish. I'll start with the braided ramps. What you're seeing here is a road. The cars are moving from the left to the right. And you can see there's an on-ramp coming in from the left, which adds traffic in the middle. So the amount of traffic in the middle is now more. Then there's an off-ramp on the other end, and some of those cars get off. So the middle section has the most traffic. And it also is the section where people are changing lanes to get in and out of these ramps. So that becomes a problem area. The solution to that is to move the off-ramp over to the left side, move the on-ramp to the right side. Now the traffic in the middle is smaller, even though the traffic on the outside is exactly the same. The problem is then that the ramps run into each other and you have to bridge one over the other. And that's why we call them braided ramps. Here's an example. And this is at the mini stack. On the right-hand side are the 24th Street on-ramps and off-ramps. On the left-hand side, you have ramps that are connecting to the interchange, and you can see they just bridge over each other. This is used commonly throughout the region. Now, collector distributor roads are sort of a permutation of that. We do the same thing. We move the ramps from right to left and left to right, so we have less traffic in the middle. But instead of building a bridge to separate them, we connect both of them to a parallel roadway, sort of a frontage road, where they can move. Now, the weave is on that frontage road, but there are no signals, there are no driveways. This is for free flow traffic and is designed to handle that weave. And again, the traffic on the main line is lower than before. So these are the primary strategies that we use going forward. Here's an example, by the way, of collector distributor roads. This is on the Broadway Curve project that's underway. Now what I'm going to do is go through a series of individual improvements and talk about why we put them there and what they can accomplish. So the first one here is we're on westbound I-10 going from the mini stack to the left to the tunnel. And the purple ramps there are on-ramps and off-ramps that exist right now. There are other ramps coming from the 51 and the 202 that feed into this as well. But in this section, there's a lot of weaving and a lot of backing up. So the solution to this was to move the 7th Street off-ramp over to underneath the mini stack. So if you're coming up on the curve on I-10, as you're coming out of the mini stack interchange, you would see an off-ramp to 7th Street. And if you're on the 202, you would see that in about the same place. And then we have a very long ramp that takes you directly to 7th Street. So all that 7th Street traffic is now moved off of the main line and is on the ramp. Now, there is one problem with this, and that is if you're coming down on the 51, that ramp continues onto the main line and now doesn't have an exit to 7th Street. We know that that's a problem. You can see with the blue line, we think there's a solution, but at this level of planning, we didn't have enough design information to be able to confirm that that would happen. So that's high on the list of the next stage of design, is to make sure that that connection can be put in place. Now I'm going to move to the eastbound portion of that same section of highway. We have a 7th Street on-ramp, we have off-ramps at 16th Street, and others that go to the 51 and the 202. Again, this backs up all the time. So we do the same thing. We put in a very long ramp, and we take that traffic off of the main line so that it's on this long ramp, and that will solve the speed differential problem. Moving on to the next one, we're now on 51 coming southbound, and we have an off-ramp at McDowell Street. There's also an on-ramp up above at Thomas Road, and that is another area where there just is a lot of speed differential, a lot of queuing. And we do the same thing. We now have a long braided ramp that moves the exit to McDowell. The off-ramp is up at around Thomas Street. Again, there's a bridge separating that from the Thomas Street on-ramp. Going to move further down the section now, getting closer to Sky Harbor Boulevard. Here we have a very short weave between the Jefferson Street on-ramp and the Sky Harbor Boulevard off-ramp. So we need to follow the same strategy one more time and get that off-ramp to Sky Harbor Boulevard further north, so that, again, the traffic is removed, there's no weave, and it also allows us to have that exit have a turnoff to go to Sky Harbor Circle, which is where the auto rental car return area is. So it improves access there. You can see with the purple line, we keep the Jefferson Street on-ramp. There is a bit of an issue because in the original condition, you could, the vertical line between Washington and Jefferson continues down to Sky Harbor Circle. That is a connection, again, that we're looking to replace when we get into the next stage of engineering. On the northbound side, again, here we have the on-ramp from Sky Harbor Boulevard and the off-ramp to Jefferson Street are very, very close. And this time we have a long collector distributor road so that if you're coming off of Sky Harbor Boulevard, you don't get on the main line right away. You follow up that orange line until you get to about Washington, and then you move on to the main line. But people on the main line wanting to go to the 51 and the 202 get off very early and are on that orange line all the way up. So again, we're moving a lot of traffic off of the main line onto the parallel roadway. Just a couple more. Further south from the Buckeye Road on-ramp to the I-17 off-ramp, another weave section, and we do the same thing. We provide a braided ramp at that location. Going northbound, same location, the Buckeye off-ramp, this time with the I-17 on-ramp. And what we do here is we take trips from I-10 on I-17 that want to go to Broadway, to Buckeye Road, and they have a direct ramp that takes them right to Buckeye Road. And there's still the access from the 17 onto the main line, but that weave again is entirely removed. Finally, the last one we have is on the HOV lanes, the section between the mini stack and the 3rd Street directional HOV ramps right at the beginning of the tunnel. That's a 1-lane section. We're going to add a second lane, which will make it easier for cars entering in to space themselves properly, and also creates a lane for that whole distance so people can weave into the correct lane as they wanted to get out on the west side or on the east side. What are the results of this? What we can see here is that we're comparing these numbers now to an existing condition, which actually comes from 2018. So the existing condition is what it was like in 2018, which is very similar to what it is today. We did that because we had a wealth of data to calibrate our models for that year. And we're going to compare that to the year 2050 after these improvements are made. So we're comparing the future to what we experience today. So today there are 35,000 vehicles in the morning peak hour that are able to get through this corridor. In 2050, with these improvements, that grows by 15% to 40,000. And the average speed increases by 10 miles an hour from 28 to 38. That's a 34% increase. There's a 44% reduction in total delay. So these, I think, are quite stunning numbers. We're very proud of it. I think you can see here what the value of this will be. The PM peak hour, not quite so tremendous, and I'll get in a moment why that's the case. But we get an even larger increase in total vehicles, a 23% increase to 44,000. The average speed doesn't change much at all. And there is a reduction in delay, but it's not as much as we get in the AM. And I should mention that the AM peak hour is higher than about 18 to 20 hours a day. It's the highest of that period of time. So when we look at the AM peak, that's sort of the worst case for most of the day. During the PM, the numbers are not as good, but that's only for the PM peak period. And the primary reason for that, it's not something that we really can design to solve. We have constraints. The Deck Park Tunnel is a constraint. We would need more lanes through the Deck Park Tunnel. If we don't do that, then there's going to be a queue. Vehicles can't get through, they're going to queue back. Certainly, there's nothing we can do about that. We have a similar problem at the 51 and Loop 202. The right-of-way constrains those areas to the fact that it's not practical for us to go through the process of widening those. So those become constraints. So in the PM peak hour, the vehicles can get into the corridor, they can move quickly, but then there's going to be a queue when we get to these constraints. And you can see these. This is the AM peak hour, and you can see how green it turns in 2050 with the improvements. Here you can see that there are some long areas where the speed is slower, and that is the reason for it. It's just those constraints that it's not practical for us to solve those problems. Now, issues needing further analysis. I've mentioned some of these already. The 7th Street access from State Route 51 is one that needs us to address with further engineering. The Sky Harbor Boulevard and Sky Harbor Circle connections from Jefferson Street, same thing. We will need some additional improvements outside of the area. There is something that can be done at the 51 and the 202, things like that, that we will want to do to help increase the number of vehicles that can get through. And I just want to reiterate our commitment to making all this happen without any negative community impacts. And that's still our objective. We can't say absolutely for certain until more design is done. But everything that I've showed you, that's a primary objective, that we can achieve that without any negative community impacts. Our schedule is now, we're sharing this with you. We'll be sharing this with the public in a public meeting in October. And once that happens, there will be a period of time where we integrate those comments and change as we need to our recommendations. Then they'll come back to the committee, all of our committees here for approval in the winter of 2024. Repetition one more time. This is the beginning of the process. We're establishing a framework moving forward. Some of these issues are going to need to be addressed in later stages of development. And finally, the recommendations from the study will be the basis for improvements that are to be funded through Prop 479. Chair Wheatley and members of the committee, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that presentation, Bradley. And it's easy to see why those are the most heavily congested highways in the region. And with that,
Madam Chair,
yes.
if I could just add in real quick too. If you recall, during the discussion that we had last September, there was a lot of focus on the safety elements and the safety concerns on the corridor. One of the questions being posed of us, is there anything we can do in advance of this project? So we've been working with ADOT. There's not a lot of obvious solutions. There's several technical solutions that are being vetted through the ADOT process, but I think that just underscores the need for the investments with 479. A lot of the improvements that Brad showed during his presentation, those are capital investments that require funding to be able to design and construct. And so while there might be some tweaks that we're able to make on the fringes, if you will, ultimately we need the solutions that would be funded through a 479 to not just enhance travel through the corridor, but also enhance safety. So I just wanted to follow up on that comment from last TBC.
Thank you. I appreciate that, John. Supervisor Sellers.
When you're dealing with downtown area, right-of-way can be a major concern. Are there any significant right-of-way issues with the proposed solutions?
Our objective is to not require any more right-of-way. I can't guarantee that we'll achieve that today because there's some engineering work that needs to be done in the future to confirm that. We're doing everything we can. What I can tell you is that we think there are only a very small number of very small pieces of land that might be required. We're doing everything we can to avoid any of them having to be taken.
Yes. Mayor Orsborn.
Thank you, Mayor Wheatley. So every time I drive through this area quite a bit, and every time now I'm going to be thinking of you and the changes that you're recommending and wishing that we could hurry those up. This is taken into account without any other infrastructure changes that are being made. So and a major one that we're talking about is in Prop 479 is State Route 30 that would dump into I-17 at the Durango curve, I think. When that happens, does that take some of the pressure off of this central corridor here that we're talking about?
The scenario that we based our 2050 analysis on includes everything that is in our RSTIP, everything that's being planned. We have what we call a conformity model where we put all of those improvements to the year 2050. All of those other improvements are in as a part of the analysis.
Wow. And it still remains red, at least in the afternoons coming back. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments? And again, just want to reemphasize that the improvements would be implemented with the passage of Prop 479. We'll get comfortable, Bradley, because we have you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
might I ask another question? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The question I have is, do you have any data for us on what happens in the event that we don't do this? You talked about the numbers of where it was in 2018, having driven the roads in 2018 and now, and more people, and we continue to grow. How do those numbers go down? Like you showed us, especially in the PM, that it's relatively stable with this much capital investment. What does it look like without this capital investment?
We did, as a part of the analysis, look at that question. I don't have the data on the top of my fingertips here, but I do know that the total number of vehicles that can get through goes down. It gets more congested. Vehicles are slower, fewer of them can get through. It's quite a significant difference. But we thought that there wasn't a lot of time. And I think for your purposes, we wanted to share compared to what it looks like today. But we do have that, and we have our final report coming out. It will show those impacts, and they're quite severe.
Thank you. And might have a follow-up question, Madam Chair.
Please.
The second question, I guess, is does your 25-year data that we're looking at, because obviously we're ending in 2050, does it take into account all other transportation alternatives that are coming into play? For instance, we talk about the expansion of the light rail, we talk about adding of streetcars, but also the investment that we're making into denser housing with, multi Costco's on the bottom. I don't know the actual word for that is, but to reduce the amount of travel time. Does your study take into account any investments we're making into that as well?
It does take into account the improvements in the transit system, yes. And it does take into account changes in the way policy deals with people traveling. It also takes into account the change in the way people work since COVID, and looks at that as well. So all of those are included to the extent that we have them in our regional transportation. So it's consistent with those policies and programs that we currently are planning.
Madam Chair, Mr. Pace, members of the Transportation Policy Committee, just to expand on that answer a little bit, the underpinning of this analysis and our sub area model here is our regional travel demand model. And so we go through quite a lengthy exercise there to forecast out what population is going to do in the future, what density will do in the future, where people are going to work, where people are going to live, what their travel patterns are, the impact of potential future infrastructure. So the simple answer to that question is yes, we certainly take all that into account. But to Mayor Orsborn's question, as we look to the future, as we look to 2050, ultimately it's not just going to be one solution, because while we can make significant enhancements here on this section of freeway, there are limitations, and those limitations are going to require the ability to choose different travel modes, the ability to make decisions about when and how trips are made, and really provide people with options. And so just to re-emphasize that point, we take all that into account, but as we look out to 2050, We really need to look at the transportation system as a system itself, not just discrete pieces. And we certainly do that as part of these efforts.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you both. And Mayor Wires.
Yeah, thank you. This may sound strange to most people, but sometimes you can speed things up by slowing things down. And I say that I've been in every state in the United States more than once, and I've seen some states, mainly I see them on bridges, but where they literally have digital speed limits at certain times of day that they will slow everybody down. And sometimes by slowing people down from, some people don't call it a speed limit, they call it a qualifying limit, right? If you can slow that limit down to say 40 during peak season, peak hour, and you don't have the accidents, everybody goes faster overall. Have you guys even thought about doing that as a short-term solution or cheaper than doing all the bridges and everything? And that's something that I have to believe would be a few years out, even if we had the money today. But has anybody talked about maybe in those areas slowing all the lanes of traffic down? We have the DPS where the officer sits there and monitors transportation. They could certainly make those calls as far as whether that speed limit would need to come down or go up or could go up. Has that been discussed or talked about?
I agree with you that slowing down speeds will have great benefits, primarily to safety, but also in getting traffic flow. So I agree that those are good things to consider. We did not consider that as a part of this study. We wanted to see what can be done as an investment to maximize it. But that certainly is something that is on the list of a possible plan to improve situations even further.
For a follow-up, that's something that I really would like you guys to pursue and report back to us. Give us an idea, even if it's temporary. It seems to me that we all of us want to see less accidents. We all want to see things speeded up. But you know, the other thing that people don't talk about is if we don't correct this problem, the problem's always going to be there. What's going to happen is businesses are going to go, our trucks are sitting here too long, our employees can't get to work, and they're going to start going out to like Buckeye. You know, who would have thought, right?
Where's Buckeye?
So, you know, we want to keep people in certain areas at the same time, provide for smart growth, planned growth. But by not making a change, not fixing this, we're not gonna accomplish that goal at all, for whatever it's worth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other? Yes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I had a quick question regarding some of those projections. Obviously, we're starting to see when we had COVID, a lot of companies allowed their employees to work from home, but I believe we're starting to see a shift where they're requiring employees to come back to work. Is that being accounted for when you're looking at these studies and these projections for the amount of folks that are going to be on these roadways?
It is. That's a factor that's integrated into the modeling that we do. So over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been monitoring what the impact is on travel throughout the COVID period, and following that, we do annual counts so we can see how things change over time. As we develop the model, we adjust future forecasts on how many people are going to be working at home versus traveling to their jobs. So all of that is included in health. So the answer is yes, we do include those.
Thank you. Okay, hearing none other, we will move on to item 7, which is our North Valley Transportation Update, which will be for information and discussion. And we appreciate you again on this item, Bradley.
All right. Well, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committees, for allowing me to give you another update. And this one is on the North Valley. This area is a bit smaller than some of the other areas we've talked about. And for those of you who are new, for the last few months, we've been providing an update on a geographic area of the region, identifying problems and what we're doing to find solutions. And this is the 4th in that series. And so that's what we're doing here. And the area we're talking about basically goes from the 101 freeway up the 17 to State Route 74. This is an area that's growing pretty rapidly. Here you can see numbers as of 2023, 244,000. There's going to grow by about 70,000 people between now and 2050. I think the interesting thing is we're in the middle of a very, very high rate of growth. In just the 2 years between 2023 and 2025, another 12,000 people are moving in. 21 more thousand people are going to move in by 2030. The numbers start to slow down a little bit after that, but we're still in the middle of rapid growth in this corridor. This is showing where the growth is occurring. South of about Deer Valley Road, you can see there's a fairly high density of population. There's not a lot of room to grow. But as we go through future years here, you'll see that the growth isn't occurring down there. It's occurring to the north. And so even though we have this entire corridor, the growth portion of it is in the northern part of the corridor. And here's something interesting I didn't realize until we started looking at this. Employment is actually growing faster than population in this area. And that's unusual for areas that are sort of away in almost a suburban type environment. But certainly we're getting a lot of employment growth in this area as well. Now, this corridor, we have 9.5 miles with 11 interchanges. That's quite an urban density for interchanges. What we're going to do now is separate this corridor into two parts. The northern part, where all the growth is occurring, we have 7 interchanges in 8 miles. At the southern end of this, we have 4 interchanges in only 1.5 miles, a very, very high density of access to the freeway at that location. We're going to look at these separately. So I'll begin with the northern segment. When you look at this map, when I look at this map, what I see is how few routes there are to get through this area. You've got the 17 going north-south through the middle. How many parallel roads are there? Well, there's one about a mile to the east, which is 19th Avenue and North Valley Parkway. Then, but North Valley Parkway doesn't actually go all the way up. There's another road, 19th Drive, I think it is, that makes that final connection at the end. You have to go 9 miles to the west to find another way to go north and south through this area. On the eastern side, along the 101, it's 4 miles away. But by the time you get to State Route 74, you're 9 miles away again. That's not a lot of redundancy. It helps to understand how important the freeway is in this area. Now, when we look for east-west streets, it doesn't get a lot better. We have Dove Valley Road connecting to Sonoran Desert Road. That's the only one that can get you from the 17 over to Cave Creek. And on the other side, you have Happy Valley Road and the 303, and that's it. There are no other ways to go east and west. Now, as we look at these 9 interchanges in this area, the surprising thing to me is there's only one interchange that really is having a problem right now with congestion. And that's at the 303 and the 17. Now, one of the key reasons that this one is having this problem, it's not the only reason, is that there's a development, TSMC, the Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company, that is building a facility just to the northwest of that interchange. Currently today, there are 12,000 people working on site. They're building buildings, or they're installing high-tech equipment inside of those buildings, but 12,000 people every day. That's contributing to the problem, but it's not the only problem. There are a lot of people using the 303 to get to the 17 as well, especially making the commute further south. Another interest, and by the way, even though there's only one interchange that has a problem, we do have another indicator of what the lack of redundancy gives us. And that happened during Memorial Day weekend. You may remember there was a closure on the 17 north of the 303 during that weekend for, I think it was for maintenance work, but people couldn't get to their destinations. They were going through all these little residential streets that exist there. They didn't have any real alternatives. It was a real problem. I think ADOT was quick to respond and get better information out, but it's an indication of how sensitive these are, that something like that can have such an impact on this area. Now, these two yellow interchanges, this is Dixoletta and Jomax. These don't connect to long streets. These are really, they have a very small service area because there just aren't streets that go very far away from these interchanges. But having said that, they're critically important to that local community because they don't have any other places, roads to use. So they're just as important, even though the service area is quite small. I want to look now at this interchange and see what are the demands that are causing the backups. And the diagram that you're looking at here actually comes from Google Maps. And if you've ever pushed the traffic overlay on the map, you have red lines and green lines that show speed. That's what we're looking at here. And you see this yellow line going from the interchange of the 303 and 17 going to the west. That yellow line is telling us that there's a backup in traffic. So this is a common theme on mornings on weekdays that occur on this. And of course, going in the other direction, we have the same kind of backup onto the main line of the 17. So these are problems that we see here affecting this interchange. And the interesting thing is, I don't think TSMC is the only contributor because this is traffic going north at night. This is when the people at the manufacturing company are leaving. This is other people and their commutes into the Peoria and Surprise areas that are making turns using the 303 to get home. We do have a solution for this. We have system interchange elevated ramps that'll be in place. They're currently in final design. And Prop 479 will be the funding source for these very early next year or by 2026, we hope. There are other improvements going on. The 303 is being widened. We have some interchanges that are going in there. Two of them are already there, the 43rd and 51st Avenue interchanges. There are also a number of arterial streets in this area that are being done. Everything in blue here is an improvement that needs to be developed and funded by local jurisdictions. There is one widening of Sonoran Desert Road you see on the east side. That's a Prop 479 project. But all these other projects are projects that would need to be funded and developed by local jurisdictions. There are some gaps in we have frontage roads along this section. There are some gaps, as you can see here. We don't know when those gaps are going to be needed. We know that the improvements that are being done to the interchange at 303 and the 17 are going to be elevated to allow for a frontage road to go underneath them at some point in the future. We don't know when that will be. Now, this one is hard to read, but I will, what I'm going to do is to stretch this out like a rubber sheet. So it makes it just a little bit easier to see. I apologize, this is not the best graphic. But what we're looking at here, if you see a blue line, that means the traffic is less than the capacity of the road. If you see a yellow or a red line, that's where the volume is exceeding the capacity. So we see today that the 17 between Pinnacle Peak Road and Loop 303 looks really good. Although there is a section in the southbound direction in the morning where it's beginning to slow down. We can see that there's some congestion. By 2030, we get more. By 2040, it's red all the way down in the morning. And by 2050, it's actually in both directions. When we look at the PM peak hour, It even looks better today. And I can attest to this because I use this portion of the freeway coming in to and from work. So it works really well today. By 2030, we're going to start seeing some congestion, slowing of speeds. By 2040, it gets worse. And by 2050, now we're just red in both directions. So this isn't, we have some time, but we're going to have to find a solution to prevent this from happening in the future. So for the northern segment, we do have improvements underway at the 30317 interchange. They're in final design. They will be implemented soon. We need to do future year planning because we have other major problems that we want to avoid if we can. And then finally, construction of this critical infrastructure will need to be funded through Prop 479. Now I'm going to move to the southern area and take as fast as I can here. Now we have 4 interchanges. Actually, 2 of these are half interchanges with a connection with frontage roads so that there's full access. I want to look now at the interchange of the 101 and 17. What you'll see here is that some of these ramps are very long. The on-ramp going northbound onto 17 goes all the way up to Deer Valley Road. I want to back up. No, the other thing I want to say about this is if you look at the design of all the ramps in the interchange, it's a very elegant design. It's easy to see how people make the moves. It's a very nice design. But one thing to keep in mind is the ramps are interconnected. So when something happens on one ramp, it affects other ramps. And I'll give you an example. The westbound 101 to northbound 17 backs up almost every day onto the main line. Okay. Well, it doesn't only affect that ramp, but if you're going west on the 101 and you want to go south, you have to fight through that traffic to get to your ramp. And if you're coming from the west side, you're going to come up and hit that where the ramps join together, and suddenly there's you have to slam on your brakes. The same thing is happening in the other direction, southbound to eastbound, and affecting other ramps as well. Now, this is something interesting I didn't expect to see, and that is the volumes we have today on these 2 ramps are higher than the year 2035 design speed traffic that the ramps were designed for. So we have more traffic than we thought we were going to have by 2035. And I can add to that from a recent count we just did, the main line itself, east of this interchange, also is a higher volume than we thought would be there in 2035. So this begs the question, why is this happening? Well, I think we all know that when demand exceeds capacity, that causes a delay. When that delay becomes obsessive, you have very long queues. People begin to change their travel behavior. What does that mean? Well, they'll choose to take a different route if they can, or they'll choose to go at a different time of day. They may even choose to change where they live or where they work. They react by not making that trip during the peak hour. Okay. And then when you add capacity to just a portion of the trip, it makes the overall trip faster. Like, for example, widening the 101 on the east side, the Pima Freeway was widened recently. It opened in 2021, I believe. When you do that, it shortens the path. More people now come in and start using that interchange. And that increase that happened actually took us to a number that was higher than what we thought we would have by 2035. Okay, so this is a diagram to just show why these ramps are being hit so hard. You have people coming from the 303 and down the 17, and they want to go to Scottsdale or to the east side of Phoenix. How do they get there? Well, they really only have one good way to do that. That's to come down, take a single ramp to make that turn in both directions. And those ramps today are 1-lane ramps. So as growth continues on the north side, this volume is going to continue to grow. And it's a problem we're going to have to deal with in the future. Now, here we have a number of improvements. I already mentioned the dark blue line on the east side. That's the improvement to the 202 that was just completed a couple years ago. We have the same thing going on the west side. And that's going to be widened the same way the east side was. And construction on that is going to begin before the end of this year. That's just about to start. We also have, as you can see, the ramp westbound on the 101, turning right to go northbound on the 17. That improvement has actually been added to the light blue line, the project that's widening the 17 on the west side. So there will be an improvement there that will help add capacity to that movement. It's only in that one direction. And then we're also providing a similar additional widening of the ramp from the 101 to the 51 as well. So those improvements are underway. And as I just mentioned, as these improvements are built, it may attract even more traffic, affecting the whole area. Now, there are also a number of improvements on 17. The most important one is direct HOV lanes between the 101 and the 17. And then there are a number of interchange improvements going from that point all the way down to the 10 on the 17. Those are improvements that will be funded through 479. So our key takeaways, we have bottlenecks that are going to persist. They're not going to go away, even though we are putting improvements in place. And we need to plan for that as it happens. Now what I want to do is take these two and put them together into a single area and talk about the North Valley Transportation Corridor Study. This is something we plan to undertake very soon. And it has the objectives basically to deal with the issues that I've just shared with you. And the timeline with that, by the spring of 2025, we're hoping we can get a consultant on board and take 12 to 18 months to do that study. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Bradley. Great presentation again. From someone that has lived their entire life in the East Valley and now the Southeast Valley, but also a member of a regional board, I recognize how important it is for us to recognize these areas of our communities that have these transportation, pinches and constraints. And it's been a goal of mine to visit these areas in all my free time, right? In all of our communities. And I'm sure you've probably shared similar concerns. And that's why I really appreciate this series for those that haven't been able to make that happen in their free times, but to see these firsthand. And so I've really appreciated going through these with you. With that, do we have any questions or comments from our committee today for Bradley on this topic?
Chair.
Yes,
Wheatley.
Councilmember White.
Thank you so much, Bradley. I really appreciate the presentation. I see so much contingency on the passage of 479. I just would like to know your thoughts on the state of affairs without it, because those are some pretty important interchanges. And with the extreme growth we're going to see in the Northwest Valley with TSMC and other industry coming out that way, is the outlook as joyful as it is without?
Madam Chair, members of TBC, I'll jump in on that one for Brad. Without Prop 479, there will be no identified funding source for these improvements. So certainly, as we talk about a 303 I-17 system interchange, that will be critical to support the growth in the area, to support all the economic activity in the area, the folks commuting, the new jobs that are popping up in the area. Without 479, simply put, we will not have the funding to be able to do the type and kind of expansion projects that we need, because it's such an instrumental funding source as part of the overall regional portfolio. So just being able, we would have to only rely on state and federal sources, and those are insufficient to really do the type and kind of improvements that we need.
Chair and John, I think that I saw limited, even more so here, involvement from localities. So it's not a lot of local improvements that could be done without 479. I just didn't see as many as we saw in the prior state.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the Transportation Policy Committee, if you really considered the different funding streams that go into transportation here in the Valley, the primary funding source that the state had identified years ago in the mid-70s was intended to be the Highway User Revenue Fund, and both from a statewide level as well as a local level. But when you control for inflation, you look at statewide HERF collections. We actually collected less in 2023 than we did in the year 2000. And over the same time period, the state's population has grown 45%. And so reliance on the HERF is insufficient to deliver the type and kind of infrastructure. And it's both on a local level as well as the regional level.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you so much for your presentation, Bradley. Oh, yes, hang on. Oh, okay.
You know, I was sitting here,
Fairwires.
you know, thank you. I was sitting here thinking about her question, you know, what if we don't get it? It's not, I think the way I'd like people to look at it is it's not the fact that it slams the brakes on what we're currently planning on doing right now, but what it really does is it sets us back probably 4 years minimum, because we have to start all over again and then go out for the funding, and all the prices are going to go up. We cannot afford to take the chance to not get 479 done. And even though we can't advocate it for it, I certainly am, and I would hope that everybody else would too, because it's critical for the entire county and for the state, quite honestly. Okay.
Agree. Thank you, Mayor. Item 8, this is an item on the agenda for information and discussion of the overview of the regional programs, and it will be presented by Ted Brown, Deputy Transportation Director, and Shu Yao Hong, Data Application Program Manager. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Wheatley and members of the Transportation Policy Committee. Excited to be here to give you an overview of our regional programs and provide an example of how some of these programs provide exciting benefits for our region. So hopefully you've become very familiar with the map on the screen. This is the defined projects in Prop 479. These are the known quantities, if you will. But there's another piece to this puzzle that we're going to talk about today, being the regional programs. So I'm equally hopeful that you've seen this beautiful Sankey diagram, which has the expenditures and revenues in 479. And today we're just going to talk about this little bottom piece here. This is our regional programs, as well as the annual investment, the overall investment over the life of 479. So before we dive into the programs, let's talk about why programs at all. The first thing is flexibility. It's probably the biggest strength to a programmatic approach. By tying funding to a program like Intelligent Transportation Systems, we can continue to refine the needs and focus of a program as those needs change. We can help bring our needs of tomorrow to today and address them quickly. These programs also provide opportunity. And what I mean by that is that most of these programs will be evaluated competitively through a needs-based evaluation. And as we all know, those needs change. You heard Brad talk just a minute ago about TSMC. That was an unknown, quantity in this equation. Programs help us address those needs when they appear. And finally, these programs allow us to be responsive to constantly changing conditions, not only at an individual level, but at a program level. Particularly in the technology area, things seem to be changing very, very rapidly, and this allows us to keep pace with that. I want to put a little bit of a finer point on this. When we were developing Proposition 400 back in 2003, we didn't have any programs. Here's a couple other things we were using in 2003. So we've got a high-tech Motorola Razr phone, a 2003 Ford Taurus, and Windows XP. That's not to diminish any of the fantastic work that went into Proposition 400, merely to acknowledge that predicting the future is very, very hard. And by taking a programmatic approach, we give ourselves better outcomes. Now, a moment ago, you heard me say we didn't have any programs in Proposition 400, and initially that was true. However, as we moved through Prop 400, new sources of federal funding became available. And when they did, some of those funds were taken to create the programs you see on the left here. However, as we learned through MAG's study in 2020, the assessment of federalizing transportation projects, funding these small dollar projects with largely federal funds is a little inefficient. It really extends your project timelines, creates an administrative burden, both for MAG and for the member agencies. With that in mind, the competitive programs in 479 will be funded through a mixture of federal formula funds and sales tax funding to maximize the benefits of both. So let's talk about these programs. Here's a list from the first slide. We've added the funding source, the total investment, and then the annual investment. And I want to give you a couple caveats right off the top. The first being that that annual number can and will change. The Regional Strategic Transportation Infrastructure and Investment Plan is the mechanism that will define how that's laid out. Some of these programs are already in development. Others are going to take a little while to get off the ground. The second caveat is that not all the program funding will be programmed through iterative calls for projects. Some of it, like safety or non-motorized infrastructure, may be allocated through the freeway program for their respective purposes. As you can see on the screen, these programs cover a wide spectrum of needs for the region. We've got air quality, we have a suite of arterial programs, and I should note these are new arterial projects, not the ones in the defined plan. And then, of course, we have our heavy hitters, safety, non-motorized infrastructure, ITS. I also want to note that the program policies for each one of these programs will move through MAG's policy committee structure for approval before implementation. And further, any criteria that we're going to use to evaluate these programs will also move through the policy committee process. Now, programs by their nature are a little hard to define, but we wanted to provide you with an example of a concrete project that could potentially turn into a program coming out of the ITS category. The pilot project that Xu Yao is about to present cost MAG approximately $60,000. Now, $60,000 to explore a technology that could potentially be deployed across the region for less than $1 million a year, or 1/30th of the annual ITS budget. With that, I'll turn it over to Xu Yao.
Thanks, Ted, Madam Chair and members of TPC. As Ted mentioned, we want to use emergency vehicle preemption, EVP, as an example to show you what an ITS project might look like under the 479 programs. And I will start with what it is exactly, why it's important, what's the current technologies being used in the field by many agencies in this region, and what are some of the new things that is coming up that has potential to improve EVP in a cost-effective manners. And we are doing a pilot project right now with City of Tempe actually to evaluate those benefit claims as well in the field, and what are some of the findings we have to date. First of all, emergency vehicle preemption is an ITS technologies that interrupt the normal traffic signal timing plan to provide green lights or extend green lights for emergency vehicle approaching an intersection, responding to a call, while providing red lights to all the conflicting approaches. It allows emergency vehicle to get through an intersection quickly and safely. It has both safety and mobility benefits, and first and foremost, it helps reduce the response time for emergency vehicles when every second matters. Secondly, it is much safer when the emergency vehicle enters an intersection when it has the green lights, reducing the risk of collision with other road users, other vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists crossing the intersections. Lastly, emergency response inevitably will have impacts to the other road user, will cause disruptions to traffic flows. However, the sooner we can get them off the grid network safely, less impacts it will cause to all the other road users. It will overall helping with the saving the lives and reducing the overall societal costs from emergency responses when EVP is done right. Most agencies in this region are using optical-based EVP solutions. Think of that as your infrared remote control for TV. You will have a light emitter at fire trucks or ambulance. You will have a receiver in each approach of an intersection. So when the emergency vehicle is approaching an intersection responding to a call, it will beam a specific coded infrared lights to that approach of intersections. And that information will be passed on to the traffic signal controller to let it know there's an emergency vehicle approaching for that directions, and you need to prepare for green lights for it. And then you will prompt the light change at the intersections. It is a time-proven technologies first developed by 3M in the 70s, even earlier than the flip phones we saw earlier. It works, obviously. It's better than having nothing at all. However, a few decades later, we have seen some drawbacks associated with it that make it harder and harder to ignore. First of all, as a hardware-dependent solutions, you need to have hardware devices installed in each intersection, in each vehicles. That takes a lot of upfront costs for hardware purchase, installations, and also maintenance over the life cycle of all these equipment. The other common issue we heard from agencies a lot is it's sometimes very hard to know when it is not working, because there are multiple pieces that could go wrong. And when something doesn't work, it's very hard to diagnose what exactly went wrong, unless you bring a fire trucks actually to do a test run through a corridor to see where are the issues. The other issue here with the infrared communication is it requires line of sight. and it has a limited range issue as well. It's also subject to weather temperature in the atmosphere. Although illegal, there are some authorized emitters out there in the black market trying to take advantage of these technologies. However, vendors are catching up, coming with coding patterns to only allow preemption for permitted vehicles. But that introduces another potential issue with compatibilities. You may know that in this region, due to the mutual aids agreement between cities and the central dispatch, when an emergency call is made, the nearest and appropriate emergency responses resources will be dispatched to a call, regardless of the jurisdictional boundaries. That means sometimes the fire trucks and ambulance will often end up in the different jurisdictions that might be using an incompatible EVP solution there. And that could cause issue with that regional coordinations. There's a new type of technologies being coming up. It has many different names and variations. It can be called GPS-based or cloud-based or central-based EVP. The idea is simple here. Many emergency vehicles are already reporting their real-time location through something called Automatic Vehicle Location Module, AVL module. Many agencies are already having communications to the intersection they operate through wireless or fiber network. It's mostly for the purpose of getting the traffic signal status and occasionally update the traffic signal timing plan to the field, but it does provide a way for agencies to operate and issue a preemption command to the signal intersections. Putting these two pieces together, if we simply look at where a fire truck is and if they are responding to a call, and when they are near an intersections, we can issue a preemption command from the traffic management center in your cities and towns to the intersections based on the approach that fire trucks is approaching. It certainly allows a much more advanced notice you can do than the infrared technologies, but it also doesn't require any hardware. So this type of technologies has many benefits that is addressing the drawbacks we have seen in the traditional approach. First of all, like I mentioned, it's a software-based solution. No hardware are required. Also, there's no longer range limits or line of sight requirements for this type of solution because it's more like a data integration exercise behind the scene. Lastly, and the most appealing to us is it's much easier to integrate with other AVL data sources or other traffic management platform that can talk to those traffic signals. It makes it much easier to scale to a larger projects with multiple agencies. So we are working with City of Tempe and Tempe Fire Medical Rescue Department on a pilot project right now involving 70 intersections as shown on the map here. We have 7 emergency vehicles that are equipped with a specific type of transponder from a company called Haas Alerts. And we are piloting this GPS-based EVP from a company called Light, one of the providers of such solutions. We are still in the first part of this 12-month project because we need more data to evaluate those claims. However, we have seen some promising findings so far already. First of all, the first thing we want to check in the pilot project is if it works, right? Something can work in paper, but not necessarily in the reality. So it works. That's what we found so far. We have issued close to 200 preemption commands triggered by the piloting technologies in these pilot projects. And also, as part of that Haas Alert transponder, it can also send out emergency vehicle, emergency scene alerts to other load users through Waze navigation apps or some of the selected vehicles infotainment systems. And we have seen over 7,000 such alerts being sent out to notify other road users there's an emergency vehicle approaching you or there's an emergency scene in front of you. But more importantly, in our pilot projects, we have seen so far a 10% reduction in travel time for emergency vehicle going through intersections. That is compared to the optical solution that has been deployed in these locations. And cost-wise, Ted kind of gave a hint already that this is based on our comparisons, almost 20 times, not 20%, 20 times cheaper in terms of initial setup cost per intersection compared to the optical-based solution. It wasn't even considered a vehicle-related cost because some of the optical-based solution require a per vehicle license fee that keep adding things up. When a region, a growing region like us, those costs quickly add up linear to the number of intersections and vehicles we have. Lastly, because our pilot is still ongoing, so we borrow a number from a comparable study in California that's seen a 42 seconds reduction in code 3 incident travel time. Code 3 incidents are those require lights and sirens on for the emergency vehicle. When every seconds matter, a 42 seconds difference could be difference between life and death, or a tear down and rebuild versus a repair. With that, I will just circle back to one of the points that Ted mentioned earlier that if we were asked hypothetically 20 years ago to nail down a specific technologies for EVP, we probably would say back then that we probably will go with optical-based solution and lock in with that. And you see that many years later, there are something new things coming up that could have potential to change that. And I think that further highlights the flexibility those program area can provide for us in the 479 programs. And with that, I will just turn you over back to Ted to close it out.
Thank you, Shu Yao. To close us out, I just want to bring us back to this slide. This table represents a $3.5 billion investment across 9 programs that could have a tremendous impact or effect on our region. ITS is just one example, but these programs could fund all sorts of solutions, everything from safety improvements, high intensity activated crosswalks. We have new pedestrian crossings, vehicle detection and monitoring equipment that we haven't even thought about yet. These are just solutions we're thinking about today in this moment, and I have no doubt that 10 years from now or so, we'll have better data, new ideas, and new technology to help keep the region moving. With that, Chair, that completes our presentation, and we're certainly available for any questions.
There we go. Thank you so much, Ted and Shu Yao. We appreciate the presentation. Are there questions from Supervisor Sellers?
Yeah, quick question. If you have 2 emergency vehicles approaching an intersection from different directions, will the study look at how you deal with that?
Yeah.
Madam Chair, members of TPC and the Supervisor Sellers. Yes, MEC actually done the EVP study back in 2016. So those are issues we look into. So some of the technology solution out there for this is adding a confirmation light at intersections to give the emergency vehicle responder a prompt that if they are getting a preemption or not, first of all, or if there are multiple requests being placed and where they are in terms of the sequence of getting a green lights at those situations. And some of the new technologies are trying to move that confirmation light from an infrastructure basis confirmation light at the signal to something you can install in a vehicle, further reducing the cost of adding actual hardware there that require maintenance, but moving something to the vehicles that's also much easier for the emergency responder to see. I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you. Mayor Wilson.
Yes. Question is the aspect on it. You have a street that you have, excuse me, pedestrian that's got, the light and everything's got permission to go. And here comes the siren coming in. Yeah. What happens in that situation? Because you got a pedestrian now that's, in the walkway legally, but you're now wanting to change that light.
Yes, Madam Chair, member of CPC and Mayor Wilson. Yeah, that's certainly something that need to be subject to each city's policy and individual intersection setting to program that. So traffic controller can take that into consideration. So it will be really subject to each city's policy if they are ITS equipment, how it was set up. But it is a parameter that can be tweaked. If there's a pedestrian crossing sessions in place, there will be settings you can tweak about that. And the other thing I want to mention here is this is highlighted that the more advanced notice you can give your intersections, it actually buy you some time to clear out those conflicting approach. And that's the other reason why the potential of these new technologies could actually help alleviate that concern as well.
Yeah, Councilmember Garland.
I just had a comment. Our Tempe Fire Medical Rescue Department loves this so far. They appreciate the fact that, seconds do make a difference when we're trying to save lives. And just what could this look like if it was more than 17 intersections to really make a difference. And so thank you so much for letting us be a part of that pilot. And one of the numbers they gave me is has gone up as high as 12% in the time that it's saved and reduced to get to the people that they need to get to. So thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Haney.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I also had a comment. My other job, I actually get to drive the fire truck for one of the departments in the Valley. And so this one, when this came across, I was super excited about this. I like the approach you guys are taking with harnessing that technology. I can tell you the intersections are one of the most dangerous things that we have to do when we're going code 3. In our line of work, we always say time is tissue, and with fire doubling in size, even more so, we always say every minute, but it's with the type of product that's being used in a lot of the things that you find in your household, it's growing even quicker. And so when we're talking 42 seconds, that can be really life or death. And so having this this technology at our intersections, it makes such a huge difference when you're talking about response times. And with a lot of us operating under the automatic gate system, it just makes sense for it to be uniform throughout the valley and throughout the region to make sure that whether you're getting a Glendale fire truck, a Phoenix fire truck, a Tempe fire truck on those major incidents, that everyone has access to that same technology to reduce our response time. So thank you both for your presentation. I'm excited to see where this goes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, council member. Yes, Mr.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. A couple questions on redundancy. The current solution is the optical solution. I wonder if you could speak a little bit on the redundancy of when those go down, what happens, and switching to this new model, the EVL, I think it's what you're calling it. What redundancy do they have as it is internet based? I'm assuming, as you're saying, cloud based. So obviously, you're being provided internet-based service versus the optical-based service is not an internet-based service. And, you know, our internet utilities aren't held to the same accountability as our electric utilities are. And so perhaps you could speak on what happens when one goes down with the optical solution and what will go down with the internet-based solution. And, you know, we're now putting the burden of this 42 seconds, these things now on an internet provider who, you know, right now they're doing some service work in my neighborhood. My Cox went down for 7 days. I got nice little notes saying, hey, it's down. And I got a lot of flyers from the Google Fiber people because they're like, hey, what's up? But you know, my electric will never go down for 7 days. It would result in legal action from the state. But my internet service provider is not held to that same accountability. So I'm curious to know what redundancies we have here when we talk about safety.
Sure, Chair Wakely, members of TPC and Mr. Pace. Very good questions. To your first questions, when the optical system went down, it just won't work. That's simple as it is. For the there's new technologies, if I may go back to those last slides, it's make it easier to explain that. There are a couple of pieces here. For ABO data sources, there's actually something called FirstNet. That is a dedicated network built for emergency responder by federal governments after 9/11 when they recognize in times of crisis, you need to make sure emergency responses get those communication and not congested with all the cellular communications. So most of those information are transmitted through that separate network, I believe currently maintained by AT&T. It's separate from the cellular network that all of us use on our smartphones. So that's the first part of that. But you rightly point out that there's another communication here from the city and towns to their traffic intersections. And that communication now mostly are done through either fiber network that is separate from the consumer internet fiber network. It's mostly a city-owned fiber network that is communicating to multiple intersections. But from time to time, when a fiber network is out of range, a city may use a wireless hooper to connect nearby intersection through wireless communication. It's a bit different from the Wi-Fi network we use at home, but it's in a similar concept. And we do see that those reliability can be improved as well. But for this technology to work, you do need to have both those pieces in place. And the other thing would be when they go down, I think one beauty of this solution is that it can coexist with the optical-based solution as well. So it's not like we will tear down that optical system in one overnight to replace it with this solution. So we recognize that for a period of time, they might most likely going to coexist because those solutions are there in the intersection already. So that's the other transition that we foresee if we do choose to go forward with such solutions.
Thank you.
No other questions. I just wanted to circle back to Ted's presentation and how important the added flexibility is. Recognizing in Prop 400, every dollar was accounted for Queen Creek. We were not able to take advantage of those funds for our arterial streets and how important the added flexibility is. And so just wanted to highlight that. But we appreciate your presentation here today. With no other questions or comments, we will move on to our legislative update, which I recognize there is none. So We will move on to item number 10, requests for future agenda items. Are there any requests from our membership on an item for a future agenda? Hearing none, the next agenda item is comments from the committee. Are there any comments or announcements from the membership? Okay. Hearing none, our next meeting is of the Transportation Policy Committee will be on Wednesday, October 16th, 2024 at 11:30 a.m. With no further business, today's meeting is adjourned. Thank you.